Now it's time for your roundup of news from Africa with me, Claire Murphy. Here's our top stories for you. Thrown out, Kenya's High Court has suspended a number of controversial anti-terrorism measures signed into law just 2 weeks ago. A top judge targeting 8 clauses that rights groups say are a threat to basic liberties and free speech. Vital work on hold. A clinic treating gang rape victims in DRC has had its accounts frozen for alleged tax fraud. But supporters of Dr. Denis Mukwege's Panzi Hospital say it's actually the €40,000 demanded by the authorities each month that's the problem. And time to give up. Scores of FDLR rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been surrendering to the UN, but as an ultimatum passes for them to lay down their arms, an estimated 1,500 of the Hutu insurgents remain at large. First up, Kenya's High Court has suspended a number of controversial anti-terrorism measures signed into law a fortnight ago. A judge threw out 8 clauses that the opposition claimed threatened human rights. The decision is a setback for President Uhuru Kenyatta, who's facing mounting pressure to tackle Islamist al-Shabaab militants and separatist rebels. Our correspondent Capucine Diane updated us from Nairobi just a little earlier.
Security bill was passed by President Kenyatta without a referendum as stated in the Constitution 2 weeks ago, and then challenged by the opposition, resulted, as you stated, in 8 clauses out of 100 being suspended this morning. The case of this anti-terrorist bill was taken to the High Court as the opposition and many human rights activists believe that many of its clauses threaten liberties and free speech. For instance, some of the clauses that were suspended were the right for the security service to hold suspects for nearly a year without charges, or prohibit journalists from reporting on matters that may cause fear. But despite the decision from the High Court today, President Kenyatta continues to claim that the anti-terrorist bill is the way forward to fight terrorism and protects the life of Kenyans. That being said, the opposition is standing its ground and going as far as accusing Kenyatta of creeping towards dictatorship. So while today's court ruling is a big victory for the opposition, the real test will come when the case properly begins later on this month.
OK, and how has the government been reacting to the court's decision, and what will it mean for them?
Well, President Kenyatta has been under a lot of pressure after the attack on Westgate, but also the numerous terrorist attacks on Kenyan soil throughout 2014, many of which were claimed by al-Shabaab. So in a way to show that he was taking action, the president kind of had to replace 2 of his officials, his police chief and his interior minister in November, and then quickly introduced this new terrorist bill just 2 weeks ago. But how these measures will affect the security on the nation is really hard to say. Perhaps we should wait to witness the changes put in place by the new blood in the government, called Joseph Bono and Joseph Nkaseri, who now hold key positions in the government, and of course see whether the 8 clauses suspended today, which will be debated in Parliament in the coming weeks, will actually be amended by the High Court in the next few weeks.
Moving on, Dr. Denis Mukwege says his Panzi Hospital in Bukavu is being unfairly targeted by the authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The clinic, widely lauded internationally for treating victims of conflict rape, has had its bank accounts frozen for alleged tax fraud. Dr. Mukwege says urgent action is required as 500 staff have gone on strike and the interests of patients is threatened. Haxie Myers-Belkin reports.
For 3 days now, these doctors and nurses in Bukavu have been protesting outside their local tax offices. December's salary has been blocked by the authorities. All those protesting work at the Panzi Hospital, run by Dr. Mukwege. The root cause of the standoff, the legal status of the hospital that made its name through work with victims of sexual violence. The Congolese government maintains it's a private centre and as such needs to pay tax on employees' salaries. But Dr. Mukwege insists it's a national referral centre and should therefore be exempt from paying the $600,000 tax bill. The Panzi Hospital's accounts have been frozen for a month. Many feel the accusation of tax fraud is merely the government's excuse to launch an attack on Mukwege. Last November, the gynecologist won the prestigious Sakharov Prize and used his acceptance speech to criticize the Kivu region's poor governance. In a statement released on Friday, Mukwege denounced what he called fiscal harassment. He added that the financial and political deadlock is hampering the hospital's ability to treat its patients. 40,000 of whom have walked through the hospital's doors since 1999.
And staying in DRC, scores of FDLR rebels have been surrendering in the east. But as of January the 2nd, UN ultimatum passes to lay down their arms or face military action. An estimated 1,500 militants remain at large. Forces for the Democratic Liberation of Rwanda, in one guise or another, has been at the heart of instability and conflict in the region for the last 20 years.
Fighters part with their guns as their families look on. Friday marks the end of a 6-month-long UN-mandated amnesty that's seen around 350 FDLR militants give themselves up, after which UN forces have vowed to resume combat operations against the rebels. Speaking at a ceremony marking the final days of the initiative, Kivu's vice-governor was pleased with the outcome.
We welcome this move, and we think that it will contribute significantly to the re-establishment of peace.
But there's no denying the initiative has been only partly successful. Estimates put the number of active FDLR members at between 1,500 and 2,000. Only 350 fighters have taken up the UN's offer to disarm. Speaking last week in Goma, where 67 fighters surrendered to the mission, one representative from the Southern African Development Community stressed there was a long way to go. He issued what he called a solemn and urgent plea to the FDLR leadership.
Leave the forest. Put your weapons down. Be a full part of this move towards peace, so that 2015 can be a new year for stability and hope.
Primarily formed from members of the Rwandan government and army ousted in 1994, as well as Rwandan refugees, the FDLR is accused of a spate of civilian massacres over the course of 2 decades. After handing over their weapons, these soldiers and their families were transferred to Kisangani to join those who had surrendered before them. They may only represent 20% of FDLR fighters, but a spokesperson for the group has vowed that the process of disarmament will continue. Progress that appears slow but steady.
A solution to the crisis in Libya is not possible without international intervention. That's according to the president of neighbouring Niger, Mahamadou Issoufou. He was speaking after a meeting in Niamey with France's Defence Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, who's been visiting French troops in Chad and Niger. Le Drian rang in the new year with French troops at the Madama installation in northern Niger, which is being built to combat the growing flow of weapons and jihadists from Libya. To Gambia, where intelligence sources say dozens of military personnel and civilians have been arrested and arms and explosives seized following an alleged coup attempt. Heavily armed men attacked the presidential palace on Tuesday. It took a long gun battle before forces loyal to veteran leader Yahya Jammeh overcame the insurgents. Jammeh, who was out of the country at the time, now insists it was an attack by dissidents based in Germany, Britain and the US, and was not a coup by his own military. Take a listen.
The Gambia Armed Forces are very loyal. As far as we are concerned, there isn't any single participation of the armed forces except in nullifying the attack. So it cannot be called a military coup, because I've seen in some media houses saying that there was a coup. This wasn't a coup. This was an attack by a terrorist group backed by some powers that I will not name now. But of course we know where the dissidents are based.
And finally, anyone transiting through Cape Town as they travel home from the holidays should check out the International Airport's Flybury. That's the new terminal library dedicated to the free exchange of books. Honesty, of course, is very important. Passengers can swap their finished book for a new one, and it has really taken off over the holiday period, building up a wide choice from novels to maths grinds to gardening manuals. Travellers are chuffed to be getting something for nothing, of course, but bookstores at the airport are not so happy. Their sales are down 25%. And that's all your African news this Friday, but Karen Roberts is back with all your main international stories in just a moment. Do stay with us.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question.
But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris, bonjour à tous, bienvenue si vous nous rejoignez sur France 24 et Paris.
And Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.